Today's edition of the Spotrac podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. Visit bettoredge.com or get the app in the iOS App Store today. Get cracking. Use code Spotrac, SPOTRAC. Grab $20. Spread it around a little bit. Go head to head. There are some competitions. You set the VIGs. You set the lines. Take the gaps that the big boys build in for themselves out of the process. The cleanest, safest, fastest sports betting marketplace on the internet. That's bettoredge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Tuesday, July 15th. A little bit of an extra podcast today. We've got some pieces on Spotrac.com worth talking about from the baseball world. And we've also got a franchise tag deadline in the NFL. We're going to start there. Trey Smith, the guard from the Kansas City Chiefs, is the lone tag still remaining in the league. It's a big one. It's a saucy one. We've seen the Chiefs do this before. We've seen the Chiefs trade the tag. We've seen the Chiefs make the player play out the tag. And, of course, we've seen them extend players out of the tag. Well, the deadline to do that today is 4 p.m. Eastern. And there's not much momentum as of right now in terms of public outcry. But I do think that the expectation is that a multi-year deal will be landed. So let's talk about what that might look like. The guard position has blossomed, financially speaking, over the past couple of off seasons. Somewhat plateaued this year just because of a lack of need. But we're at a position now where anybody in the offensive line, interior, exterior, is going to get massive, massive coin to sort of align with the top positions in the league. So the wide receivers have hit 40. The edge rushers are about to go well north of 40, in my opinion, with some Micah Parsons, TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson, etc. news forthcoming. And if we just look at the average pay at this offensive line's position, Tristan Wirfs, 28 and change, Penei Sewell, 28, Trent Williams, 27.5. Those are the tackles at the top of the list. Trey Smith's $23.4 million franchise tag is actually the highest average paid guard in the history of football on a one-year guarantee, of course. Trey Smith has signed this tag basically immediately in March, by the way. So it is on the books. It is fully guaranteed. The Chiefs do have the right to trade him off that if we get to that point in time. And by the way, that's not necessarily a deadline today. In fact, that probably precludes what happens at 4 p.m. Eastern today. Here's the way it works before we start talking about the numbers. If no deal is cracked by today's deadline, Trey Smith is now locked into a one-year contract. You're going to hear a lot of people say he must play on this contract. That's actually not the case. We have seen in the past players past the deadline be stuck into the one-year presence, but then renegotiate that 1 year. Up or down, obviously. But for the most part, what we see is some sort of renegotiation where it's similar money, tons of incentives built into it, void years to spread out this thing for cap purposes. So that's maybe plan B right now for a lot of people. What does that multi-year look like? If we look at the guard position, we're talking about a situation where Landon Dickerson with the Eagles re-up that $21 million a year. Now, that number's a little bit of fool's gold. Let's be perfectly frank, okay? This is a 6-year contract. There's a lot built into it. You know how the Eagles operate. Every couple of years, they're going to re-up, drop in a signing bonus, lower the cap hit, make the AAV look nice and round at the top. So there's a little bit of fool's gold built into that one, but that is the going rate. Chris Lindstrom, 20.5. Robert Hunt on free agency with the Carolina Panthers at 20, along with Quentin Nelson, Indianapolis at 20 as well. So we're certainly looking north of 20, and we're certainly looking north of 21. Why? Because a $23.5 million franchise tag was handed out and signed. That's the market value. It's just how these things operate. So that's the foundational piece. Now, do we see players go lower on an average basis to lock in multi-year guarantees? Of course. So you want to tell me this ends up at $22 million a year, which puts them at the top still on an average basis, but maybe gives a little bit of a discount? Fine, because the next number to talk about is the total guarantee. Robert Hunt on that free agent deal locked in 63 over 3 years with the Carolina Panthers, and Nelson got 60 in his extension with the Indianapolis Colts. Those are the top dogs. So if we just do the quick math and we put 22 million a year on a 3-year guarantee, we're at 66. We've pretty easily hit the top of the market with the most important pieces. And if we flip over to 3-year cash, it's similar. Robert Hunt got a little bit north of 63 million with some per game bonuses built in and some incentives to go from there from playing time. Aaron Banks at 63 over 3 years. Unfortunately, that doesn't come with full guarantees based on how the Packers operate and structure their contracts. But if we call that a practical 63 over 3 years, those are kind of the going rates right now at the top of this market for guards. Again, a flat 22 per year, fully guaranteed for the first 2 seasons. That 3rd year kicks in next March, and we're at 66 over 3. I don't think it's enough, quite frankly. Where the cap is, what the team is, his importance on the interior of that line for Patrick Mahomes, how they've operated both in free agency and per extensions for Creed Humphrey and Jawan Taylor specifically. They're going cheap on the left side of that offensive line with the tackle based on some draft picks they've made over the past couple of off seasons. So he's pretty damn important on the left side of that line. And I can tell you right now that the numbers we're throwing out there are foundations. It's where I would be starting as an agent. However, we're 4 hours away at the time of this taping from this deadline becoming reality. And if it's 23 million guaranteed today or 66 million guaranteed today, I think a lot of clients are going to bend and break to take that 3-year guarantee. So those are sort of where the numbers sit right now. Again, not a ton of momentum currently at the time of this podcast to kind of push us in the direction that something's forthcoming, but we'll know a hell of a lot more tomorrow, and what that means for the Chiefs going forward, and what that means for this position as we flip to the offseason in the winter, where a couple of rookies will need market resetting deals yet again, because the NFL cycle just keeps on churning. One last thing. Can that franchise tag be converted into void years and flipped over 5 years for cap purposes? Yep. Again, you can take a 1-year deal. You can keep it a 1-year deal. You can throw some dummy years on that, and the Chiefs can save a bunch of cap space going that route if they need to, if they desire to. The reason I say that is that's a big point of contention right now from the top down with owners, GMs, and Roger Goodell. That might be right there one of the use cases that could change, either in the next CBA or maybe even as an amendment to the CBA if they can get enough parties on board. So it's possible today. It might be exactly how the Chiefs operate to finish off the summer so they can roll over some cap space into 2026. But for now, it's about the next few hours on Trey Smith watch to see if he can lock in some sort of multi-year guarantee before that 4 p.m. deadline. One more piece of NFL news. Jauan Jennings, wide receiver, San Francisco 49ers, back in the news after a 2-year extension last offseason, is now requesting another re-up, and rightfully so. Deebo Samuel out of the picture. Ricky Purcell's injury status is questionable still to this day. And Brandon Ayuk is going to miss the start of the season unless something goes terribly right over the next couple of weeks. But long story short, Jennings' role, which increased last year significantly, okay, his previous career high was 35 catches, 400-plus yards. He went 77 catches, 975, and 6 touchdowns in 2024 with an obvious, basically a double snap count to his previous career high. He's looking around the room saying, that's probably who I'm going to be again in 2025 at the very least. And if the production remains and the synchronicity remains with Brock Purdy, who's locked up for the next 4 seasons, why not expand the role, expand the contract? He's set to make $7.5 million right now. That's with an option bonus that's due 5 days before the start of this regular season. So that's forthcoming. And 7.5 just isn't enough for 70-plus catches, nearly 1,000 yards, 5+ touchdowns in the going rate of wide receiver financials. So what does that mean? Is he SOL? He might be, okay, because we're pretty late in the game. It makes no sense for him to hold out of training camp and risk the $50,000 per day preseason. He'll forfeit, much of the base salary here, which is basically 1/18 of a minimum, $65,000 per preseason game. He's got per game active bonuses built into this contract, and we go from there. the 49ers are pretty good at this. They recognize an issue, even though it's been made public here, and they, generally speaking, sweeten pots where needed. The problem is they're also rigid with fair market value. And if they look at the player that he was 2 years ago versus what he was last year, there's obviously wiggle room. Now, can they choose to reduce the role of Jauan Jennings and thus offer a reduced rate in this pot sweetener contract? Sure, but a hell of a lot of things have to go right. Kittle's got to stay healthy. A couple of young tight ends have to kick in. Obviously, the running back situation is crazy fluid with McCaffrey getting into that twilight part of his career, obviously, and always injury prone. We mentioned Purcell, who's going to have to take a step forward if healthy. And then Ayuk's comeback, you just never know. You just never know with that one. So they've kind of put themselves into a position where they probably should, could, would, need to do something with this Jennings contract. I can tell you right now, though, by putting just his 2024 production into our algorithm, he's a $19 million per year player. So fair market value on the current role that he's in and the one he expects to be in 2025 is 2 for 38 going forward, plus the 7.5, which, you get yourself to a nice round 45 over 3. So are we making him a $15 million per year player for the next 3 seasons, 2 of those fully guaranteed, so a 2 for 30? I don't think many people gawk at that, because if you start looking at the actual numbers at this wide receiver position, it's still peanuts. Okay, I can tell you right now, from an average basis, $15 million per year is 26th. It's what Cooper Kupp just locked in with Seattle on basically a 1-year deal. It's what Khalil Shakir locked in Buffalo, actually slightly less than that in Buffalo, to be a second or third option, but a little bit more of a slot guy. So if that's the role that Jennings is going to play, right, that Godwin / Debo / Khalil Shakir role, there's money to be made there. Not top of the market money, not even close, in fact. But you want to put him in a situation where he's 26th, 27th average pay in the league and could be the number one option for this team for the better part of 2025, maybe even into 2026. I think both sides can win on this one. So we're talking about at least doubling the 2025 compensation, which is $7.5 million, putting this thing on like a 2 for 38, 2 for 40 in terms of new money, New Year's extension, and add it in all together to make it about 3 for 45 million, 2 years of that fully guaranteed. We'll see. Time's of the essence here. It's July 15th. Camp's open in a week or two here. And the 49ers are a really interesting team. Could surprise the hell out of us, could backslide significantly in 2025. But good on Jennings and his camp for reading the room a little bit and understanding that putting the pressure on the team late in the game here could benefit them significantly. All right, Dan, you're back. Back-to-back Major League Baseball segments. It's a beautiful thing. It must be the middle of July, and it is. Your thoughts on the Home Run Derby, the format, the broadcast, the outcome, the results, everything?
Overall, I enjoyed it. The format is, I know, contentious. It's also
it's constantly changing, right?
Yeah, it's fine, but I think that's the most confusing part is it seems like there's a new wrinkle often. Regardless, broadcast, not the biggest. I don't think it's the best job that they do, but they've just also dedicated less resources to baseball overall. So not overly surprising. Not the Cal Raleigh, Brent Rooker tiebreaker, not the greatest look coming down to that when they could have just had some sort of swing off like they did in other rounds. So overall, though, I thought the Cal Raleigh plus family story was a can't miss, can't lose situation there. So I thought that was great.
Yeah, a couple of quick numbers just because that's what we're doing here. Cal Raleigh makes himself $1 million. He's on an $11 million compensation package with the Mariners this year. Runner-up Junior Caminero, $500,000, which is pretty good coin for a guy making like $785 this year. All the other participants who didn't make to the final round make $150,000, with the exception of Oniel Cruz, who added an extra $100,000 for hitting that ridiculous 513-foot bomb at Truist Park last night. So pretty good money to be made there. For some guys, it's basically double the compensation for their salary this year. And there's plenty more to come because it's for those young guys, the pre-arb pool, things like that, all kind of add up at the end of the year for what was much needed in terms of compensating these players properly for the amount of work they're doing on the field, even to start their Major League Baseball careers. So that's good to see. Let's flip the switch. It is the fake mid-season for Major League Baseball, even though we're about 60% through at this point. I got a piece up on Spotrac.com that sort of highlights some of the greatest hits from a financial standpoint. So basically what I did is I went through our 2025 free agent lists, the contract extension list, and then some of the leaders across the board to sort of highlight the financials for some unique players that have stood out in the first half. I guess let's start right there with Cal Raleigh, Dan, who did sign that arbitration extension before the start of the season. That's 6 years, $105 million. He's got a nice signing bonus that tacks on to this season, and then things get, kind of flat for the next few years. I think it's a $34 million payout through the first 3 years of arbitration that would have been. Your thoughts on this contract? He's a catcher. There's some things that suppress this out of the gate, but he's one of the best value players in baseball right now, even with this contract extension on the books.
For sure. This is classic win-win. The Mariners locked him up right before he really exploded. And he locked in a nice, healthy $100 million. Like, did he essentially probably leave money on the table? Yeah, but by the time it's all said and done, maybe it's not that much money where can't blame him for locking in that early guarantee. So otherwise, and when I say the Mariners got him at the perfect time, the power's been evident. The great defense has been evident. I think the strikeout stuff was a little bit concerning, but we've kind of seen him eliminate some of that this year. So obviously on his way to probably a runner-up for MVP behind Judge, but still a hell of a season so far.
Where does this guy land positionally over the course of this contract and maybe a little bit after? He'll be 33 at the expiration of this contract. How long does he remain a catcher? Does he have first base pedigree? What's the B here for Cal Raleigh down the road?
Well, he won Platinum Glove last year, which is best catcher at the position overall. I don't see any, by all accounts, he's great managing the staff, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't see any reason why this wouldn't age well from that perspective. I mean, could he shift over? For sure. I think he's a dynamic enough player that could make that move, but I don't see any reason he'd move off the position, in the next 5+ seasons that this contract covers.
Yeah, a staff that just got a little deeper yesterday, right? With Cade Anderson being added to the mix, a player they absolutely didn't need. This is one of the deepest starting rotations in all of baseball, but man, it's always good to have another guy coming up, right? Holy cow.
Yeah, for sure. You can never have too much pitching. So whether they just roll with this guy or this group of guys, extend somebody, make trades to better their offense in other ways, there's a lot of ways they can go here. So,
all right, let's get down here. I called this one the Philly special because the Philadelphia Phillies starting rotation has been strong for a bunch of years, and it's underrated. This is, if you're not a local baseball fan in the Philadelphia region, you probably don't know most of these pitchers outside of Zach Wheeler, who, by the way, is having another Cy Young candidate year and is in the All-Star game, of course. Christopher Sanchez, 28 years old, just signed a 4-year, $22.5 million extension. They started this year, bought out some pre-arbitration, bought out all of arbitration, and then there's club options that take him into free agency as well. So there's a ton of value there. He didn't make the All-Star game, but I don't know if you heard this. Did you hear Philadelphia honored his bonus despite that? They decided he was All-Star worthy and gave him the $50,000 anyway.
Yeah, which is going to open up a whole can of worms going forward. But even in our system, how we're going to track technically unearned award bonuses, that's not something we've encountered yet. So it's going to be
we need a gift option. It's a gift.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. I mean, not to like totally get off tangent, but we're seeing this play out with the second round pick stuff in the NFL, where two guys locked in a guarantee and the rest of the group says, whoa, I want that same guarantee. I mean, could we start to see a little bit of that trickle into this sort of award bonus stuff? So
anytime you get an anomaly, everybody else wants to make it a trend. So you're absolutely right on that one. This could open a huge can of worms, but I don't know. It's kind of a good thing, don't you think? If the team decides you deserve it, pay them. Because so many times we hear the exact opposite. Let's be honest.
Right. I'm coming from the side where coming from the frame of mind that both sides are literally going by the contract and what it says in the fine print. Right. So both sides are trying to hold each other accountable to that. And here we are having like basically a contractual break, which is really rare in not just the MLB, but really any professional sport like that. So
can I put it this way to you? Because I know this is kind of your neck of the woods. There's something to the Philadelphia front office looking at the next 3 seasons of Christopher Sanchez in arbitration and seeing $3.5 million, $6.5 million, and $9.5 million, and realizing this is probably a bona fide number 2 starter on most rotations. And they're getting his arbitration for about $20 million total. That's a steal. And they know it's a steal. So anytime they can sweeten the pot to make him feel a little better about being with the organization is probably a win for them at that point, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Ranger Suarez, another cog in that Philadelphia starting rotation wheel, did not get extended. He's kind of the lone wolf on this rotation right now because Philadelphia has been extremely aggressive. They gave Zach Wheeler an early extension. He remains the highest average paid pitcher in the history of baseball on this extension. They gave Aaron Nola. They brought back Aaron Nola on a sizable free agent deal. That one hasn't exactly panned out as needed. But the point is they're paying pretty much everybody, and they didn't pay Ranger Suarez. He's the 4th best Cy Young odds right now in the National League. So obviously he's holding up his end of the bargain from a productivity standpoint. But he's a pending free agent. Is this going to be one of those guys at the end of the year that we're watching in the winter because he hits the open market, or do you think the Philadelphia Phillies just hand the bank out to everybody here?
I don't know. I really don't want to punt on this one, but it's going to be a tough situation. They have a lot of money committed to their staff, who they choose. I know Sanchez is a massive bargain right now, but how they kind of continue to navigate that when they have some nice kind of supplemental players coming up. Mick Abel has already debuted this year. Andrew Painter is one of the top pitching prospects in the league. So, the rich get richer, right? So how they lock those guys up financially, I'm not totally sure how that's going to work out, though.
I'm looking at an injury history here, Dan, where he missed a good solid month last year to a back injury, and then a month and a half to start this season with that same back injury. And you start talking about, almost 30-year-old pitcher with back problems. We've seen that script before. We've seen that movie plenty of times. My guess is, based on how Philadelphia is operated, if the contract hasn't come yet, it's probably not coming. And they're going to at least let him go and test the waters. And when he doesn't get the overpaid free agent contract he's seeking, they'll be right back in the Ranger Suarez business, in my opinion. But probably just decided that the red flags were too red to go early on the extension, and they want to see how the next couple of months play out.
Also, I should have just started with this. I forgot, but I did just double check it. He is one of the guys that switched to Scott Boras from his previous agency. So I'm recalling now that it is believed he's going to hit the open market. So
okay, all right, we'll get to that in a second. Then let's continue down this path here in terms of this little awards piece on Spotrac.com. I call it the sock swap. Garrett Crochet leaves Chicago to go to Boston, and he's been dynamic and outstanding for a Red Sox team that is kind of running on fumes right now. And yet there are people in the world who think they might win the World Series in 2025. And I'm not super far away from that concept, because if they get a couple of players back from injury here, maybe make an aggressive couple of moves at the deadline, they're certainly in the conversation in the American League to at least do some damage in the postseason. So Crochet's been a big part of that. They acquired him. They extended him out 6 years, $170 million. It's a sizable deal. It's a good deal, but he's 26 years old. He's actually playing out this season on his $3.8 million arbitration salary. So that extension doesn't kick in until next season. And he's the runner-up right now to Taras Kubel for the Cy Young in the American League. It's one of those deals where 29 teams were in on him, They all wanted at least to sniff the Garrett Crochet trade conversation, and Boston won this deal. And there's a world where this changed the course of their next couple of years single-handedly. Is that fair to say?
For sure, yeah. They and then they ponied up right away with the big contract, which caught all of us off guard by the size of it. I think we expected any trade to include a potential extension discussion, but a pretty eye-popping number for a guy who had not even thrown a full season of starter innings. But
it was basically 1 year sample size because he was sort of ramping up and then had a decent 2024. So you're right. That's what threw everybody off, is the small sample size.
And plus, there was a lot of rumblings regarding that ownership having been burned by kind of multiple big pitching contracts in a row, like starting with Chris Sale. So there was some hesitation that, people thought they wouldn't want to dole out a big contract necessarily. And then they sort of, stomped all over that point real quick once they traded for him.
This is one of those unique situations, though, where I think the trade actually forced the financials. A lot of times it works exactly the opposite, right? Based on how the financials currently reside or need to get to in the next couple of years, the trade can be suppressed or amplified. They handed out, what was it, 4 or 5? 4, I think. Yeah, 4 pretty sizable prospects back to the White Sox in this deal. And when you go and do that, you can't risk making this a rental move, right? In any regard. So the contract kind of forced its hand when he walked on for that price in terms of the trade. And obviously he's rewarded them immediately, but we'll see what happens over the next couple of seasons because it's a pitcher. So, injuries are going to factor in at some point in time, unfortunately. But good news for everybody in that regard so far. That's been one of the better trade wins of 2025 to date. I'm going to throw this one back into your neck of the woods. Matt Boyd, starting pitcher for the Chicago Cubs, went down about a year and a half ago. Tommy John looked bleak. I mean, he was one of those guys that peaked late in his career, got into his 30s, went down with the elbow surgery. Yes, we're seeing tons of players come back from those Tommy Johns kind of rapidly, but I can say this as loud as anybody. The more you age, the less you recover, right? It's just part of the beast that we live with. And it couldn't have gone better for Matt Boyd, who was brought back to health by your Cleveland Guardians a little bit last year. They gave him about a 2-month runway to kind of ramp up and show the world that he could still pitch in this game. And he did just that for you guys last year. Got himself to free agency. And I don't think anybody saw 2 for 29 coming in free agency for Matt Boyd, despite the fact that he looked like he was coming back to full health. He's been outstanding. I mean, he's been one of those Cubs players that has kind of risen to the top. And an aggressive trade deadline here in the next 15 days could make them one of the teams to watch down the stretch here, in not just the National League, but the entire major leagues. Your thoughts on the Matt Boyd resurrection?
Yeah, apparently he was on his couch when Cleveland called him and literally pulled him out of pseudo retirement. I know he was recovering from an injury, but we've seen other players kind of trust that process too. Shane Bieber re-signed with Cleveland this offseason after Tommy John surgery. John Means the same thing. We should see both of them debut sometime later this year, but obviously with that Guardian situation, that's TBD. But back to Matt Boyd, $29 million was definitely surprising for anyone, but the Cubs really needed a starter. I bet the left-handed portion of that also played a pretty big factor. He has also $500K in incentives, potentially for 80 every 10 innings, 80 through 120 this year. He's already earned the first 4. He already has over 110 innings. So he's already added $400K of a possible $500K to the 10 mil this year, but 29 mil overall. So also, I mean, I don't know him personally, obviously, but by all accounts, he's one of the nicest guys in all of baseball too. So just all around great story.
It's not a fluke, by the way, that these injured, sort of seemingly aged out pitchers keep picking Cleveland. You've talked about it a dozen times that it is the mecca for development, rehab, in terms of just the pitching staffs, the rotations, and the bullpens. it's a known thing around the league. So, and the agents are right on board with that conversation. So if Cleveland's even whispering that they have interest, that's the destination for these types of pitchers.
Yeah, and that's not even to mention Alex Cobb, who is like broken. It seems like, and he got I'm going to talk out of turn, but he got like 12 mil last year, 10 million, something like that, which was a eye-popping number for him too. So, and he looks like he might not pitch again either. So they kind of did it twice there, where obviously there are other great organizations that could be in a similar boat, but obviously Cleveland has had success with this kind of player.
Yeah, we'd be remiss not to mention Tampa in that same conversation, because they have just as much of a track record for doing so. But Cleveland, I think, with a little bit better value pitch. Run it back. Let's go to my neck of the woods, because Pete Alonso had a hell of a winter, bounced up and down, back and forth. The numbers were all over the place. You know what he was looking for. You know what Scott Boras was looking for. It didn't happen. So they settled back on this 1+1 contract where he gets good coin, 1 for 30 from the Mets this season. He can opt out. He will opt out of $24 million in 2026 because he's a top 5 MVP candidate in the National League right now, and no sign of that slowing down, both from the Mets offensive standpoint and from him personally. He's still worth exactly that $30 million per year in our system, Dan. So Boras is going to go back out there. He's 31 years old now next winter when he re-hits the open market. And he's still going to be seeking 6 years at 30 million plus, right? So maybe 6 for 200, something like that. Is that just foul play though? Is Boras going to get himself right back in this same situation? Or do you think there's now a rebirthed opportunity for Alonso to actually cash in at a good average salary on a good multi-year guarantee?
I think I'm still in the same boat where I agree with our valuation, 30 mil, which is sort of proven out in the 1-year deal. He signed basically 30 million with a $24 million player option. I still have trouble extending that $30 million over 5 or 6 years. And my only point is, I think that when you extend it that long, I think that's going to ultimately come down to like a 27.5 million AAV. But the point is he's done enough to earn the contract he was likely looking for last offseason. I still have trouble thinking he's like a drastically reborn player with a different profile that is all of a sudden going to make teams want to cough up the 30 million or plus whatever over 5 to 6 years. But that's just me. I mean, I do understand the impact. He's had a hell of a year. Some of like the regression with the average, et cetera, that we thought was going to hit has hit, but he's still been an enormously productive player. I'm not trying to poke holes. I'm just trying to Swiss cheese the argument that I don't really know if he's done enough to really like balloon some offer that wasn't there last year, right? So
is it more likely over the course of 2025 that the league has now come around to Pete Alonso is worth that max contract, or that Pete Alonso has now fully determined that New York is the only place he should be?
I don't think, well, I don't necessarily think either.
Okay.
I think he wants to stay in New York. I think, though, what has transpired over the last, let's call it 18 months, I mean, he's got to be open to other options. If a team does see what he's doing here and wants to overpay and give him something to, a ceiling contract closer to what you're talking about, I mean, he has to entertain that, right? But ultimately, if he does just want to stay in New York, maybe I'm wrong here. But I mean, I guess I'm ultimately settling in on like 6 for 27.5 AAV, which comes to 165 total. So like that's where I'm at, just versus 180. I'm not trying to say he doesn't deserve a big paycheck, but I just think he's, again, to reiterate my point, I think he's done enough to solidify what he was looking for last year rather than like unlock some new expansive threshold of a contract here.
And the math says exactly that. He is still priced exactly where he was, and probably should remain going forward. Yep. So it's kind of all right there for us to look at. The value plays, a couple of names. Pete Crow Armstrong. I mean, holy cow, right? I mean, You can poke as many holes as you want in this one. I don't think the Cubs did some phenomenal job of developing PCA into a superstar. He was just always going to be this player because of the work ethic, the player that he is, the way he plays the game, the way he sees the game. It's going to be reckless at times. He's going to have injuries. We've seen players like this kind of go through spurts, but he is maybe the most dynamic overall player in the game to start 2025. And the numbers are kind of eye-popping. 21 doubles, 25 homers, over 70 RBIs, an over 5 WAR on a really strong lineup that's going to get better at this trade deadline. And when you compile him with Kyle Tucker, it's maybe the best 1-2 lineup punch because of the differences in the way they play the game in the National League right now. There's 5 more years of team control. He's just getting started. Is this an extension candidate, or are we just holding the phone here on PCA a little bit, both from a got to see more and from a probably can make a hell of a lot more in 12 months from now?
I mean, it's tough because I can't see the Cubs wanting to lock him in at the top, and I'm all about this breakout, but I mean, I have to put it out there. We could very well be seeing his career best year, right? The power profile has never projected like this. I mean, the speed is obvious. The insane defensive skills are obvious, but I mean, I have trouble thinking the Cubs would want to lock him in at the top of a potential 40 homer. Is he going to be a 40-40 guy? And what's that look like financially if they do try and lock him up long term? So I'm all for if they should want to try, but I think the timing is not great.
Also, I just confirmed he's a Boris client. So if that amplifies your conversation any more so, there you go. Because that's exactly how things are going to play out. The Cubs may want to see more, but Scott Boras wants to see a lot more before he starts talking about dollar figures.
And I mean, maybe the Kyle Tucker thing plays in here too, where they're going to try and you like see how that plays out, and
sure,
want to divvy up their money there. So that's another looming thing they have over their heads too.
Not to mention the two conversations becoming one. If Kyle Tucker doesn't work out, Pete Alonso is going to be in this conversation this winter for the Chicago Cubs. He was last year. He will be even more so this year, all things considered. So there may be money needed elsewhere, let's put it that way, before they start talking PCA on a serious level. The Astros just keep churning out starting pitchers, and that pipeline continues to be strong. Hunter Brown is the latest. He's an all-star. He's 26 years old. There's 3 arbitration seasons still ahead of him. I think that at some point in time, Houston's going to have to jump on something early here. They've done a mixed bag in the past of letting guys get all the way to free agency, kind of dangling players in the trade market. They've been pretty good about varying how they've handled situations like this, but it sure seems like this might be the top of the food chain for them going forward. And you probably want to think about buying out these arbitration seasons versus going year to year with him, right?
Yeah, it's super. Astros are super interesting to me because not long ago we were talking about them sort of approaching the end of a window, specifically in regards to like Alex Bregman departure, plus Jose Altuve hitting kind of like his twilight years, plus
Springer, Tucker.
Kyle Tucker last year essentially. So, but Dana Brown, GM, former scouting director, expert, he's sort of flipped this thing right on its head with a couple savvy trades, real great player development. We've seen some guys just, they had a ton of injuries, especially among their rotation. We've seen guys step in and really them not miss a beat, and they're the clear front runners in that division, which is not how I saw this playing out. So my point here is we formerly thought they were like close to the end of a window, and we weren't sure how they were going to handle some of these guys like Hunter Brown. They've clearly put themselves right back into a window where I do think that they should try and lock up one of these young guys. If it's not Hunter Brown,
Pena
there's
for
plenty
sure.
of there's
Jeremy
plenty of
Pena, yeah. That's a really nice way to frame it though, because they've had damaging misses, right? Like the McCullers contract is a disaster for them, obviously from an injury standpoint. The Forrest Whitley situation never panned out. That was supposed to be the next iteration of this thing, right? The top of the food chain. And all of a sudden, they've got 2-3 players just kind of climbing the ranks. Now, Framber Valdez Is he walking away this year? That's a guy that could walk into free agency. We'll talk about him in a second. So they do have some pieces to replace, not just internal contract extensions, but it's interesting to think about how they evaluate themselves right now from a contention window standpoint, because it's going well right now, but is it sustainable even through 2026? That might be a bigger question right now. So we'll have to get to that in the offseason for sure. But they have candidates to lock in some contracts here based on how 2025 has progressed so far.
If I can just throw the old stick in the spoke here, Hunter Brown, Jeremy Pena, both recently also hired Scott Boras.
Good Lord, we can't get the guy's name out of our mouth.
Well, specifically the Astros have a ton of guys going back to Alex Bregman. There's probably some locker room links there that kind of play out. But people see what he does. There's been some disappointing pillow deals, but then it kind of turns around and works itself out. So I can't necessarily blame him, although it feels pretty gross to say. So,
well, let's get to a guy who is definitely not a Scott Boras client, because he signed a 4-year, $7.5 million pre-arbitration extension plus 3 club options, despite the fact that he's one of the game's best relievers. And has gone back-to-back 20-plus save seasons. He's got 21 saves at the All-Star breaks for the Seattle Mariners. It's Andres Munoz. You're going to see him tonight in the game. You're going to see him a lot because this Mariners team is not going away and is probably going to be extremely aggressive at the deadline here to try to push this thing to the at least into the postseason. And, man, what an extension, right? I mean, I guess there really isn't a going rate for a pre-arbitration soon-to-be closer, because he wasn't the closer at the time of this contract extension, right? But he was on that path. I mean, the seawalls of the world were still there. They were just getting over the Edwin Diaz, window that they moved on from. So they were in flux a little bit, and he was supposed to be a sort of a cog in the wheel, but he's not. He's the guy now, and this is maybe one of the best value reliever contracts we have on the books right now.
Totally. This is like straight out of the Tampa Bay Rays page, where they perfectly threaded that needle. Where Munoz and Sewald, Matt Brash was kind of used in this role, but they were just high leverage guys that could close but didn't necessarily close. Sewald departs, they lock up Munoz long term, make him the closer, and boom. The stuff has always been there, but my point is they locked him up right before they knew what they had, locked him up, converted him back into a closer, and now we see the production.
They definitely saw the forest through the trees on this one. They had a plan. They knew the plan. They priced him before that plan was enacted. A little bit dirty. However, there's some decent incentives on this where he's going to max out at least $750,000 to $1 million per year if things stay this way. It's still going to be great value for everybody in the Seattle organization. And sometimes you just win like this. Your Cleveland Guardians, Dan, have done this a dozen times in the past decade and a half.
We did a pre-arb extension piece earlier this year, and I had put Cade Smith on that as an option because we keep hearing Emmanuel Clase trade rumors, and to me that's like a Guardians move, lock up Cade Smith, but as he's a high leverage guy, but on maybe like a $10 million total deal, and then you move him into that closer role after a theoretical Class A departure. But I know that's a ton of projection. I was just that's just a think piece type of projection there. So
all right, we lay out a couple of the Rookie of the Year candidates in this piece as well. You're welcome to check those out. All interesting names, none of them with a pre-arb extension yet. So I think we'll get to that point at some point down the road where, basically a star player walks into the league with a gigantic contract. We're just not there yet. And it's a strong list to choose from here, from Jacob Wilson and Roman Anthony to Jacob Mizorowski and Drake Baldwin in the National League. All candidates for some sort of early re-up here soon, but nothing comes to fruition just yet. So let's get to the future free agents. We've mentioned every single one of these names thus far in this segment. And I'm just going to put this back to you. We don't have an Ohtani. We don't have a Judge. We don't have a Soto. We don't have a singular focused player for the upcoming winter free agency. But if we're going to pick one right now out of the gate at the halfway point, who is it going to be the winter of this December?
Well, from a top of the list perspective, it's got to be Kyle Tucker, just because I expect that to clear $500 million. Our numbers project that to clear $500 million. So, I mean, I think it's going to be where he lands. The Alonso conversation is not going to go away. The Alex Bregman conversation is likely not going to go away. Just Boston in general is not going to go away. They have a lot of intriguing, Trevor Story lumps into there.
And Dan, the Mets as a whole, Edwin Diaz, Kodai Senga, Pete Alonso, all opt-out candidates, all probably going to opt out because of their current production. So yeah, those two teams specifically could have a complete either restructure or massive extension window over the course of the next few months.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, where we had Aaron Judge, then it was Ohtani, then it was Vlad. We've had these mega guys in the past couple of years. I think Kyle Tucker is the next name atop that list pretty safely.
And you think the $500 million plus is justified for the Kyle Tucker that has been and will be for the next foreseeable future here?
Yeah, and I mean, totally aside from us, outside of me and you Spotrac bubble, I've heard other people such as Ken Rosenthal back it up with numbers that they think that number will be over $500 million as well. So I think the consensus is that when it's all said and done, he has not taken movement from Houston to Chicago. He's just had another dynamite year, and I don't think there's any concerns about locking him up at his age, at his profile, production, etc. I think he's going to be worth every dollar of that over $500 million in terms of being free agent, in terms of free agent spend.
I'm going to say this delicately because there are some things that line up and many others that don't, but he is going to be treated like a mini Juan Soto. He's a slightly above average right fielder. I'd say better than Soto in that regard, defensively speaking. He fills up the stat board, right? 19 doubles, 17 homers. He's doing everything right now. He's got 22 stolen bases at the All-Star break in 2025. And he's 28 and a half years old right now. And when 1 + 1 + 1 = 3 in that regard, and you hit the open market, good things are going to happen. So some people are going to be absolutely floored when that contract number hits. But I think the 12 years at 42, 43, 45 million per year is going to be the going rate for this guy. And that does make him sort of the singular focus point for free agency in the winter. Is it Cubs or the field? The Cubs have gone very roller coastery with how they've handled their business, right? Not unlike what the Marlins have done, just not that drastic, right? The Marlins go in for 1 year and then fire sell themselves for 4. The Cubs have at least maintained to a certain degree, but they are clearly having a moment right now, right? And generally speaking, when a team like the Cubs has a moment, they try to make it a 3-4 year process, not just a one and done. Kyle Tucker's got to be a part of that conversation. Don't you agree?
For sure. I think they should want to lock him up. I just think if he gets to the open market, you start getting the other big boys involved. It's the price will not be cheap. I mean, our top 3 market values on Spotrac.com free agent tracker is Kyle Tucker, Pete Alonso, Alex Bregman. We saw how Bregman and Alonso played out last year. Bregman we're projecting for about 26.5 right now. Alonso at about 30, and Kyle Tucker is well over 40, for about 43 million right now. So that's just the gap at the top. In like from an age standpoint, production standpoint, there's not a lot of sex appeal among position player, offensive players in this upcoming free agency. And really going forward, we've talked about this on past podcasts. They're elite players under, let's call it 29 years old, are just not hitting free agency in the next 5 years. There's very few examples outside of like your Jazz Chisholms who are people going to want to involve guys like that in a $500 million contract conversation? I'm hesitant to think that. So this could be like the last big guy for a little bit here, which I'm going to give you
the other team right now, because I think it's clear as day who will be neck and neck with the Cubs for this conversation for Kyle Tucker. The Phillies have not misstepped in how they've handled their business really at all over the past 5-6 years. And the fact that Castellanos isn't expiring in right field, and the fact that Kyle Schwarber is now expiring as a DH is probably not an accident, Dan. Could they re-up with Schwarber and keep him around maybe short-term? Sure. But if not, that's significant payroll coming off the books that could immediately be reallocated to $45 million a year for Kyle Tucker, who could easily fill more than one hole because of the five-tool nature that he presents on the field. So that's the team for me that appears to be, from a roster construction standpoint, ramping up for a big play for Kyle Tucker in 2026.
For sure. I think that's super interesting. And really, I think all of the big players, maybe not the Dodgers, although they could just like shift some stuff around and make room for him. But other than that, I expect Yankees, Red Sox, Blue Jays, etc. I think all those bigger spenders will be involved here. So
always a pleasure. I know you're doing a ton of draft work. Looking forward to a bit of a recap on the draft when the bonuses start to fly in and things like that. But great work so far. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks.